Hello everyone. Today we're going to do a little screen recording while I go over some of the things about MLA citation and the assignments for the week. I'm sorry it took me a little bit while to get this up here. I'm going to try and go through it a little bit quickly. You can review it again. I'll still try to hit all the important points. You can email me if you have any questions here. So this particular week for our class, we're going to look at the assignments first, right? Just to make sure everybody's on the same page there. So I've actually gotten a lot of emails asking questions about what is due when, So if you look, I've tried to put what's due right on the calendar on the right. October 2nd, you've got an outline. October 5th, the rough draft for Essay 2. That's the exemplification one. We're going to go over that in just a minute. But if you look on the left here, where the news items are, right? If we were looking at this week, it would have some other things at the start of the week. If it's at the start of the week, it's usually just a reading assignment, right? Or what I'm going to go over in my videos, right? Like, okay, so you might want to take a look at that and think about what a good thesis statement constitutes. It has to have an argument. It's not just like, my laptop is gray, right? It's something you could argue. You could say something like, online education does not take into account different learning styles and cannot adapt to whatever. That's a claim you could argue. Somebody could argue it with you. That's a thesis statement. So all these papers going forward, right, there's going to be a thesis that you're developing. Now, let's look at the assignments very quickly before I go into MLA. So under content, we are now in paper 2. Right, there's a few things that are hidden here. I didn't put it at the student view, I apologize. But yours will basically look just like this, more or less, right? So the assignment, the actual assignment for the exemplification assignment, the whole thing is the second one right here. Exemplification is development by examples. You have to use a source on this. It gives you a source. If you follow the link right there that describes the assignment, you pick one of two topics, technology and education or advertising consumerism. I feel like those sources might be a little bit dated at that point. So you have the option of just kind of briefly touching on those sources, like saying Postman says this, and using another source if you feel that it will help your paper, but that's not required. What is required is that you use a source, right? So the source is provided. You're still going to cite it in MLA there. Writing exercise 2 you already did. So let's go down to the pre-draft stage for writing exercise 3. Now, at this particular point, right, at everything that you need to turn in, for this particular module, I kept the standard departmental instructions. But I want what's due at the time. So turn in the outline, right? Writing exercise 3 is an outline. Writing exercise 4 is a rough draft. Turn in the rough draft. I already have your outline. Everything's turned in electronically. I can look at it. So we just need, even though it says turn in everything at every step, I should probably change that, but I just left this right as is here. So your outline is not going to be the first example, the keyword outline. It is going to be the second example, the sentence or the phrase one, right? So you start with Roman numeral I1, right? Then you go to capital letter A. Then we go to Arabic numerals. We use the Roman alphabet and we use Arabic numbers, right? So 1 and 2. Then you would go to lowercase a. Then you would go to, lowercase Roman numerals. I, lowercase. So you won't have to go that in depth. It should be a structure. You should have a thesis statement. This is about your argument for paper 2. So it's your position. It could be something like online education is unparalleled in its convenience and its ability to reach whatever without the constraints of time and schedule and blah, blah, blah. And then you would be picking details to support that as you do the outline there. So this is going to be like your final paper. So you write this, then you write the rough draft, then I give you feedback. And I'm going to have a little bit of time there. So the final draft isn't due until the 18th of October. So I have time to give you substantial feedback if you need to make any changes and do it. I would like the rough draft to be, somewhere in the ballpark of 600 words, just like the final draft. But if it's a little bit shorter, it's okay. You just need to know where you can develop things to finish it. But at least it should be over 400 words for sure, right? And over 500 really. So try and get as complete of a rough draft as you possibly can turned in. So this is the outline here. You turn it in the Dropbox. This heading is MLA format, right? If you look at that, left justified, your name, teacher's name, the class, the date, centered, the title. Now, it says outline. Okay, fine. For things like the actual papers, you should have an informative title. Like, for example, like if it said something like "Gotta buy it all," right? Then that would be a title that kind of has a slant a little bit, or online education and then a colon, reaching no one all the time, or something like that. Whatever it is, right? I'm not really that skeptical of the possibilities of online education. I think it has benefits, and I also think it has drawbacks there. So don't worry about my position. I never grade you on my position on any of this stuff. Do worry about creating a good thesis statement that is logically supported, that you can transition from one to the other idea. I'm going to make, I think, another video that has some of the common issues that I saw in the first paper, and I still owe some of the class grades on that. Weird meetings this week. Weird meetings. So I will be getting that to you this week. Don't despair. If you haven't turned it in, you may be being contacted because I had to fill out a faculty feedback form. So if you didn't turn in paper 1, that was one of the big things. I was like, okay, that's a major component of the grade. So contact me. Let me know. It's not the end of the world. I can't promise you that you'll get 100 on it or anything like that. I can't promise anyone 100, right? I rarely give those out. But I can promise you won't get a 0 if you turn that in. So be sure, right, to check with me. Let me know what's going on. Now, from here, I want to talk about MLA format, right? So I'm just going to click over to the Purdue website. This, right, it has a pretty comprehensive, ignore the pop-ups there, right? This has a pretty comprehensive list of what you need in the text. At the very least, when you are writing your paper, if you were going to quote this in the text, you would need the very first thing that appears in the works cited, the last name of the author, Baba in this case, right? And so you could just use that, and then you would not use the date. I'm going to close this out, it's distracting me. You would have the page number if you got the quote from a page number. So it would be something like this. According to Baba, right, comma, you have your quote. Then let me just do it, actually. I'm going to bring this over here. So, and then we have some quote, whatever Baba said here, right? Now, for MLA short quotes, less than 3 lines, you will have a parentheses with the page number. Let's say it was on page 78, and the period actually goes after that. Now, if you don't list the author, you would need to have the author in the parentheses there, and then the page number, right? If you don't have the page number, then I guess you don't have that. If you change sources, you need to indicate the new source. So if you had a new quote there, right? Then it was by somebody named Smith, you would have to indicate that. If there was a page number, there may not be, right? And then if you went back to the old source, you would have to indicate it by putting that name again, right? Either in the text, like according to Baba, or according to the article such and such by Baba, right? Okay, now, this is the thing. You don't have to put the last name if you're using the same source for quotes every single time. If you start with a quote and then you keep using that, or paraphrase from it. Even a paraphrase, you should put where it's from if it's not common knowledge. What is common knowledge? If everybody knows it, right? And so what does everybody know? Well, that's a matter of debate. But in general, if it's a very specific number, like social anxiety has increased by 375% since blah, blah, blah happened, then you need to cite something like that, right? You need to have a source, even if you know that off the top of your head. But if it's something like, oh, there are 10 commandments in Judeo-Christian tradition, you don't need a source for that, right? If people don't know that, that probably should be common knowledge, right? That's not specific enough to need a citation there. So in general, like let's say you're talking about a sport. You say, oh, this touchdown, you probably don't need a citation for most of the things there, unless it's a very specific historical event that occurred in like 1952. Yeah, you don't want to leave that without a source. The other thing is that the works cited page, right, it should be alphabetized by the author's last name. Only the first author has their name reversed, last and first. It's the order that it appears on an article. So let me pretend that we're on a works cited page here. Your Little Brown Handbook has like 50 pages of references. It's on a separate page in your paper. You center it, and then you go back to left justified. Everything is double spaced, so highlight everything if you're using Word. Right click on it, click paragraph. You'll set everything to double space for MLA. Times New Roman 12-point font. If you use a different font, I'm okay with that. So let's say I had a second author with this entry. I'm going to click back over here. So yeah, okay, Lundman Susan, right? Let's say there was a second author on this, right? So I would still alphabetize it by their name. And then John Smith was the co-author, right? I would have his name normally there. And then you have the period, and then you have the article title, and a period before that, sorry. And then you have the container, whatever it's in. If it's in a book, if it's in, a website, the copyright holder. So you would have the container italicized here. So if we look over back at this, Ehow is italicized here. If we look down below that, Tulsa Studies in Women's Literature, that's a journal, right? So that would be italicized as well. So the copyright holder on a website, or the name of the website, the journal entry, the book, if it's a book and a chapter in a book, and then you need some stuff that's like the date related there. And then if you do the pages, right, PP 41 to 50. So I will send you a link to that, but it's also online under content. It's just that the Purdue one is pretty well organized and stuff and easy to navigate. We're doing MLA in this. What else did I want to say about this? There's a few important things that we need to know. Oh, sources. They should be good sources, right? So if you do use a website, let me click back over to this. So let me just click on this random one. Growing importance of technology in education. As I'm looking at it, there doesn't seem to be an author. There's no author. I don't see an author. I do see some tips. This is really a general thing. If I look down, it's copyright University of the People. So what I would probably do is start with the article, The Growing Importance of Technology in Education. That's what I would alphabetize it as in my, sorry, it would capitalize. And I missed the T there. So, all right, now, if you were referring to this, and then you would have the container, University of the People, or whatever it is, italicized. And then you would have the date, if there was a date that it was copyrighted or that it was uploaded. And then you would have the URL, right? The URL, so you would actually copy and paste that there. But you're looking for an author's name. And if you were going to cite this in the text, it should still be like, let's say you were just like, you didn't want to list the whole article title in the text. And you just put it as a parentheses afterwards. You could shorten it as long as it was clear, like the growing importance. As long as it was clear that that was the site, that you got it from. So it should, everything you use in the works cited should be used in text when you're typing your paper. Okay, so I should be able to do like a checklist. So everything that appears there, you used it, even if it's a paraphrase. If you paraphrase it, you still put where you got the information. That's not a direct quote. If a quote is longer than 3 lines, so a long quote, right? Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste something over here. Okay, let's just, yeah, sure, let's just take all that. If you wanted to, I don't recommend quoting that much, but if you wanted to quote something that long, right, it's going to like freeze my computer probably. Yeah, the format's all wonky. Sorry about that. I'm not going to mess with that yet. You want it to be in the same format. You would tab it over and tab it over again so that it is all indented like that. And then at the end, you leave the period at the end of the sentence. There are no quotation marks. And you put where you got it. It would normally be the author's last name, but since we don't have that, right, we put it there. So to lead in, this is the only time you use a colon a little bit unconventionally. You say, such and such, blah, 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 according to so-and-so. Then you throw a colon there, and then you tab over everything for the long quotes if it's more than 3 lines there. And there's no quotation marks around the material. The fact that it's embedded, that it's kind of set in, shows that it's quoted in that way. All right, so you're picking one of 2 topics for this paper, right? You're doing an outline on your paper, okay? If we go back to eLearn, I'm just going to go back to the assignment very quickly to make sure we're on the same page, then I'm going to stop this recording and upload it here. If we're going back to eLearn, this, the second one under paper 2, is the assignment, right? There are some things that are in here that, I care more about than others. You can use I in my papers. I still left the department standards because this is the technical formal rules, right? Some journals will let you get away with it, some won't. So you should be aware that some classes you don't want to use I, right? But I'm okay with it, especially when you're arguing your position. Avoid dumped quotes. You want to have them contextualized in your essay, either with the lead in, like according to such and such in the article, blah. Then you have the quote, right? You don't just drop the quote in there with nothing leading up to it. You respond to it. They don't all have to agree with your position. You could put an opposing viewpoint, but you want to integrate it somehow, whether you respond to it or whatever, right? So 600 words. It's going to be an MLA, right? And if you pick, let's say, technology and education, you would read through the Postman article that's linked here and refer to it somehow. You are supposed to have a quote, but as I said, you can use other sources in my class. You just have to cite them by MLA, and just make sure that you're citing them correctly. There are a lot of auto citation things. Double check it, right? Make sure that it's right. So half the time they're right, half the time they're wrong. I'm not going to count off 1,000,000,000 points if the comma's in the wrong place or something like that. But you should be able to make it conform to whatever you're going to turn it in. That's important, whether that be for cover letters, for other job submissions, for other classes. You want to be able to make it look professional. Or if you do want to submit something to a journal, as I do, right, in my spare time sometime. And in fact, one time I got solicited by a journal that normally I do research to see what they want, right, if I'm writing. But this time the guy solicited me because he wanted an article on Gene Wolfe, who I write a lot about, right? And so he was like, hey, I want an article on this. And it was a horror journal, which I normally don't look at. I'd never read it. And so since he solicited me, I just wrote what I wanted to. I mean, it was still formal, right? But I used I freely. And the only changes that he wanted was that we took out every single use of I, just because the journal doesn't tend to do that, right? So he still took it, of course. But you want to be aware that different audiences, different classes are looking for different things. Those are the standard formal written rules. I am all in on most of them, but you can use I, and I don't need every single step turned in for every part that we do. So when it's writing exercise 3, you're turning in the outline. When it's writing exercise 4, you're turning in the rough draft. I make comments on that, you turn in the final draft. As long as everything for that topic is there, I'm fine with it, even if it does say, please submit everything before. I have it, I can access it, whatever. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video now. I think that's the important salient features. October 2nd is the outline. Upload that. October 5th is the rough draft. And then, after that, I will have given you more information going forward as we start to think about different types. Exemplification means developing it by example. You do have a thesis that you're arguing there, that you're trying to prove. So it shouldn't just be all facts, but obviously we make our points with facts, right? So we're using pathos, logos, and ethos, emotions, logic, authority, right, to make our points there. All right, contact me if you have any questions.